during the 1970s, when Disney was refining the idea for Epcot and trying to come up with something that was this international world showcase and would also talk about how people could live and work together and be a technology park, they needed something that would be iconic, something that would stand out as being really the true nature of Epcot, something that would really grab you and people could gravitate to it, and it would be sort of a focal point, and it could be like part of their marketing materials as well. And the idea they came up with was to create basically a sphere in the middle of Epcot to be sort of the central point. Problem was, no one had ever created a sphere before. No one had done a full sphere in construction like that. So they actually got together and talked about different ideas for how to do it, and they hired R. Buckminster Fuller, who was this creative type person and who had done some work with geodesic domes before. Now, a geodesic dome is one that's created and constructed in a way that's actually a lattice work that goes around as a dome, and it's a half circle basically. So what they actually did was create one on the bottom that then was the dome that was facing upward like a cup, and then they created one on the top that would be more like the traditional dome, and they put the two together. So they actually brought them together in a way so that they actually had the two domes together, and then they created a steel framework around the middle to create the full sphere. So it's not exactly a sphere, but it's pretty darn close, and you wouldn't notice by looking at it. So let's take a look at a little bit of the construction history of this, because it's a really unique thing that Disney came up with, and no one had ever done this before. R. Buckminster Fuller was kind of a Renaissance man. He had done a lot of interesting things. He was a theorist, he was an architect, he was an author. But really what he's known for is this geodesic dome. Now, he's not the first person to create a dome like this, but he's the first one to make it practical. And in the 1967 World's Fair in Montreal, they hired him to create a dome like this. The Disney company took note and hired him to come to work for the Disney company and actually help with Spaceship Earth, which was going to be a sphere. Now, as I mentioned before, what they did was they created a steel frame, and they created two domes, one on the bottom, one on the top, and you can kind of see through the construction process how it came together. So they just started creating these lattice work, these triangles that went up and down the sides that came together to make the two domes. So it's not quite a sphere, but it's pretty darn close, and you wouldn't even notice unless you were really looking at it. So it's very, very clever the way they came up with it. So as they finished up, you could see how it kind of came together, and it's really kind of neat. But then what they did was they covered it in this aluminum polymer material that gave it the distinctive look that's for Epcot. Now I'm going to show you a video here that's from the Epcot archives where they talk about this construction, and you'll see a couple of clips from this video along the way.
Spaceship Earth was totally new and unique. To build the world's first complete geodesic sphere, 165 feet in diameter, 18 stories tall, elevating the entire structure 15 feet off the ground, constructing a multi-story ride inside, and enclosing it all in a decorative skin. By making use of the technology of tomorrow, the newest ideas, materials, and techniques industry has to offer, Spaceship Earth embodies the spirit of Epcot Center and serves as the centerpiece of Future World.
We do want to give our guests a glimpse into what the future might be, and in doing so, showing unique building materials, unique structures, and taking the latest technology that's available and showcasing it for our guests. For example, the outer skin of the sphere is formed by 954 alucobond panels that were built to our own specifications. No panel shaped like this had ever been made before, and a special device had to be invented to hold them and lift them into place. It's the world's largest installation of this material. Underneath the panels, the entire sphere is sealed in a thick black rubber membrane for waterproofing. Others have used this material for roofing, but no other structure has ever used this technique to seal the entire building. Our engineering consulting firm won an award for the unique use of welding in the structural support system. We have gone beyond the building code requirements in the interest of safety.
By making use of the technology of tomorrow, the newest ideas, materials, and techniques industry has to offer, Spaceship Earth embodies the spirit of Epcot Center and serves as the centerpiece of Future World.
It's real touching to see elements that you were involved with when they were a minor concept, and you saw the development. I don't think anybody will ever realize all the blood, sweat, and tears that goes behind what that guest is going to see when they ride through that dark ride. They're not going to understand what it took to erect steel and put up drywall and put in control systems and electronic equipment.
The construction on this is really neat. In this time lapse that's a little bit longer than the one we saw a moment ago, you really get a feel for how it all came together. This is really, really clever. They built the ride system inside as they were building up the frame on the outside. The next thing they needed to do was come up with the storyline. And this is where Ray Bradbury comes into play. Ray Bradbury was a science fiction author, and he had written sort of a story that was sort of around the idea of how you bring together communication and the World Showcase and all of these ideas for technology into one location. And here's a little bit more from Ray Bradbury himself.
Let's take a look at the story behind Spaceship Earth.
We knew we wanted to have an information and communications theme, but that's about where we were when we decided to bring Ray Bradbury in to work with us. And Ray did some very brilliant writing of a very broad concept, which became the underpinning for everything we have done in Spaceship Earth.
You know, one of the great pleasures I had 18, 19, 20 years ago is going out to Disney Studios and having lunch with Uncle Walt. I was a member of the Mickey Mouse Club when I was 12 in the Fox Theater over in Tucson, Arizona, and to sit with Walt and talk about the future was fantastic. And one day he said to me, you know, the horrible thing about World's Fairs is what? And I said, the horrible thing is the year after they open, they tear everything down. He said, well, I would like to build a permanent World's Fair, and I hope someday you'll have something to do with it. I said, my God, I can hardly wait to be hired. And finally, 3 or 4 years ago, the Epcot people came by and said, remember what Walt said? Well, we're going to build a permanent World's Fair and occasionally tear down the ideas inside the walls. That makes great sense, doesn't it? So the wonderful thing about the Epcot Center to me and Spaceship Earth and everything surrounding it is that you have a permanent World's Fair. You have a chance of influencing generations of children.
Now, as you will soon see, Spaceship Earth's theme is communications, civilization and communications from Stone Age to Information Age. And I therefore think it is very fitting that we dedicate Spaceship Earth to all of the people who have advanced communications, arts, and sciences, and in so doing have demonstrated that communications is truly the beginning of understanding.
So what we did was to essentially go back and look at everything that had been recorded historically to depict sort of the rise of civilization from the time of the caveman to today, and see if we couldn't track along some pathway that would give us the ability to link events one to the other. And what we chose as the device to do that turned out to be communications.
The process started by drawing a big timeline going back to about, say, Cro-Magnon times, around 40,000 BC, and then plotting a lot of dates and events, things like the presumed invention of writing by the Sumerians and Egyptian hieroglyphics, and then moving into things like, obviously, medieval years are very exciting, coming of the printing press, and then things speed up an awful lot as you come toward the communications future, and they actually get to be a whirlwind by our times. You know, the whole process is speeded up. So what we did was to draw, at first, a big timeline, did it including with graphics, drew some little pictures here and there because that seems to stimulate the creative process. And then a bunch of us sat around for a couple of days and bunched events together. Kind of took places on the timeline and squished them together and said, well, you know, maybe writing was kind of the basis for civilization. You know, you could put down laws and things like that. And the ability to take writing and store records and do scientific calculations and things like that was sort of an era of early science and that kind of thing. And then the printing press allowed you to really have the first kind of mass communication where you eventually could send messages out across time.
And with the story concept complete, now we can move on to talking about how they actually constructed the interior and how they came up with the audio animatronics and all of the designs, making sure that the costuming was right, making sure that everything came together to create a great show. Remember that Disney was very big on every single detail. They were using period materials. They were actually making sure that all the little lapels and pieces were right for each one of the characters that were there. It's really amazing how much detail went into this, considering that you really only passed by it for a few seconds. But this is what Disney was all about, making things realistic and imaginative.
The purpose of our giant geosphere is to house the show inside. And all of these ideals, imagination, and creativity were needed to bring our show to life.
All of our figures in Spaceship Earth are pneumatic and hydraulic. We have 63 humans and 2 horses. Some are far more animated than others, and that depends upon the story that we have to tell. A good staging of figures sometimes require very little animation to tell the story. Others, we need to embellish it more. You'll find in the Greek scene where we have an actor, he's very highly animated. He's acting, his arms are waving, he's talking, he's being very dramatic. Gutenberg is only reading a page out of the Bible, so he doesn't have to have that. Wigs and all of the costuming and everything were very carefully researched so that we will have no criticism.
The biggest mural that I made for Spaceship Earth in Florida is going to be on the wall just in the entrance. To begin, I have to ask, where did men come from? Where are we going? What are we looking for? And I think the answer is power. The power of the universe, the good of the universe. It is the life, the electricity. This is where we come from, and I think that where we want to go. In this painting, I try to make people understand how man communicates, the meaning of communication, how important and powerful communication is.
And yet Spaceship Earth talks about how fragile our Earth really is, and this sets the theme.